Hi, my name is Hridya, and this is my first YouTube video. For this video about Doctor Strange, I am mainly going to be focusing on the MCU's iteration of Doctor Strange because that's the version I'm most familiar with, and it's also one of the movies that really got me hooked to the MCU. So, without further ado, let's begin. Excuse me if you see me glancing here a couple of times because I made some notes. For those unfamiliar, Doctor Strange is a magical superhero. He can manipulate reality, create shields, cast powerful spells, bend time using the Eye of Agamotto. He can travel between dimensions. He can also go to the mirror dimension. Another cool thing he can do is astral projection. He also has a lot of cool artifacts like the cloak of levitation, that kind of helps him fly. So, safe to say, he is one of the most powerful superheroes in the MCU. And Doctor Strange first debuted in the comics in Strange Tales issue 110 that came out during July 1963, and his 8-page origin story came 6 months later, December of the same year in issue number 115. I do have quite a few issues with the Doctor Strange movies. The first topic I want to talk about is the white savior complex. And the white savior complex is defined as a critical term describing the depiction of white people as liberators or rescuers of non white people, often with a focus on the perceived helplessness of the latter. It is often seen as a contemporary manifestation of colonialism, where white individuals assume a position of authority and expertise, believing they know what's best for others and disregarding local knowledge and agency. It really comes from a place of thinking you know better about the people that you're trying to help and their problems than they themselves do. Think about how when countries like India or when the continent of Africa was colonized, there was a big push and there were so many attempts at trying to civilize Indians and Africans, turn them into real men. So you can see how dehumanizing that is. I also see a hint of mighty whitey in here. And mighty whitey is when a white person comes to a foreign land and you would expect them to be inept at a lot of things that the local people are able to do. But lo and behold, they almost instantaneously become an expert in a skill that is central to the community, mastering it and becoming even better than locals who trained in said, skill for their entire lives. Think of Karate Kid. There's also a lot of cultural appropriation in the Doctor Strange movies. I love to see South Asian culture getting representation on screen because sadly there's not a lot of it. Neither South Asian culture nor South Asian people. There are only a few actors and actresses who are of South Asian descent that I can think of. So it's only a handful of them, right? I love to see my culture being represented on screen, but at the same time, I would like to see more authentic representations from the first person, instead of the opinion or the viewpoint of someone who has just observed this culture, not lived it. Marvel hasn't done it justice. And it's very annoying to see Hollywood profit off South Asian culture because Hollywood, on the one hand, has profited immensely from the active destruction of several cultural practices from Asia. You know what I mean? Which they are now appropriating. Once again, there's no benefit to people who actually belong from that community or the culture. It's all more money for the white men above. Another thing with Hollywood representation of cultures that they're not aware of is that they tend to pick and choose whatever they think their predominantly white male audience is going to like and whatever their audience would find palatable, you know, without actually focusing on the essence of a lot of practices. In the Doctor Strange movies, we see the mystical arts of South Asia getting some representation as well, with him going to Kamartaj which is a fictional place, and training there. So let me tell you a bit about the mystical arts of South Asia. You can find them all across not just South Asia, Asia as a whole, countries like Tibet, Nepal, Northeastern India, China. What is it and how is it practiced? It is usually a form of meditation and prayer, sometimes even yoga that focuses on helping one let go of their ego and connect to the higher consciousness. Practices vary from place to place, and it really focuses on self discovery and sort of ascending the human state and being able to connect with a higher power. There are varied practices throughout Asia, including Tibetan Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, and Sufism. You know, so, what I can tell you is that mystical arts, it's not really about fighting a dark force or fighting evil or fighting ghosts. There are more localized practices like Tantrism in India or shamanism in South Korea that are more focused on stuff like that. So, that would have, I think, been a better fit when you're looking at magic that can fight evil. The Autobiography of a Yogi is a good book if you're interested in further exploring mystical arts in South Asia. We also see a lot of mudras in the Doctor Strange movies. So, this, stuff like that. So, what is a mudra? It's a symbolic hand gesture that you often see in Hinduism and Buddhism, and it's also found in local dance forms like Bharatnatyam, Kuchipudi, Mohiniyattam. So, Namaste, for example, is an elegant mudra that encompasses a wide variety of meanings from being something that's used to welcome someone, to acknowledge them, to being something that's used to ask forgiveness or acknowledge fault. So, a mudra is pretty much a movement or a pose. In yoga, it's used to activate various breathing related regions of your body and influence the body's energy flow. You know, so Tai Chi again is something that's similar to this. It doesn't use mudras, but again, directing the energy through your body. But of course, we don't get any serious acknowledgement of all the different mudras that Doctor Strange keeps doing in the movies. Moving on to the book of Vishanti and Sanskrit texts. Sanskrit texts and words appear at various times throughout both the Doctor Strange movies, whether it's a Wi Fi password in the first movie or a book of spells. So, this book of Vishanti is supposed to be a book that is in and of itself a deterrent to black magic and evil, but also has the power to give the sorcerer who possesses it anything he or she wants, right? So, it's like super powerful. But I don't know why they called it Book of Vishanti because the only viable meaning I found for that word is entering. An example from the Shiva Purana describes it as, again, entering the city with the context of the Shiva Purana. So it just really seems like they just took a random Sanskrit word and decided to slap book of before it. Sanskrit texts are holy. Sanskrit is one of the, if not, yes, it is one of the oldest languages in the world, not the oldest. And there are a lot of spiritual texts, Vedas, Upanishads, and other things that are written in Sanskrit. So to see the language being reduced to something that's just used in Harry Potter style book of spells is disrespectful to the culture and to the deep spirituality that it's connected with, A lot of people pray in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is seen as a text, a language to connect to the divine. So I feel like they didn't give it enough thought before deciding to appropriate Sanskrit just because it sounded mystical. Another question that often comes to my mind is what kind of Asian fits this trope of mystical arts? You know what I mean? Even if we didn't have, let's say, Benedict Cumberbatch playing Doctor Strange, what kind of Asian is Asian enough for the predominantly white male audience that Marvel movies seem to cater to, right? Because to me, someone who's Malaysian is Asian, someone who's an Emirati is Asian, someone who's Indian is Asian. But to Hollywood, they have this very specific trope in mind of only actors and actresses who look more East Asian looking, only they're Asian enough for Hollywood. You know what I mean? Let's talk about the changes in the movie Sorcerer Supreme. The Sorcerer Supreme was actually a silver lining in terms of representation in the comics, but of course, they had to change that. While I love Tilda Swinton and I think she's an amazing actress, if they really wanted to opt for the gender switch, I think it would have really been great if this role went to a South Asian baddie like Sarayu Blue or even Michelle Yeoh, you know? I know a lot of people think that Marvel is too woke for pushing female superheroes, and I don't agree with that. I think they need to do a much better job at crafting stories that are centered around these female superheroes instead of just reinventing tropes that they often apply to male superheroes and expecting it to work here. Another thing is that I think it's high time MCU recognizes that its white male audience is extremely critical of women of color and black actresses, especially if they're playing superheroes. So, the least they can do to support those characters or those actors is to give them a good script that they can work with. There's just so much hate online, even when it's absolutely not needed. Miss Marvel, for example, was a really good show, but of course, the internet had to tear it down, right? I also think Brie Larson's portrayal of Miss Marvel is fine. I mean, she can only work with what the script has given her, right? I think a recent example is also what's happening with Millie Alcock, even though that's a DCU thing and she's playing Supergirl, she's getting so much hate, just because she talked about the hate that she was receiving. Like it's just these men online will look for any reason to completely tear down and hate women and pretend like, oh my god, like it's not that I hate women, it's just that these films are so bad. Like, no, they're not. You just hate women. When is representation going to be enough? At this rate, it's not looking good. Never. I'm not talking about Hollywood, but all major film studios like across the world. We've only scratched the surface in terms of representation. It's really sad that even now it's the white straight male or fair skinned upper caste men, for example, that get the most representation. We really have only scratched the surface, like I said, in terms of authentic representation of underrepresented communities. And often, even when representation does happen, it's from the lens of an observer rather than from the lens of a person who has actually experienced it, right? We really need more authentic, multi-dimensional representation of black people, Asian people, Native American people, queer people. The list goes on and on, right? I think seeing Benedict Wong in the continuations as Sorcerer Supreme is pretty cool. Same with Ned discovering that he has powers. But again, they also really fit into Hollywood's little box of what being an Asian means. I've read online people being like, we got Shang-Chi in Legend of the Ten Rings, so isn't that like representation? And that again is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, no, it's not. Imagine if we only had one Marvel movie that was led by a white male superhero. Would that be enough representation? I don't think so. And though, yes, Hollywood is based in the US, but so what? It's watched by people across the world. They make so much profit from countries like India, for example, and the US itself is not only inhabited by white people, you know. So Marvel's audience isn't just white, the people who give their money, who make their movies a success. So I think Marvel does have a duty to authentically represent cultures if it chooses to, like weave them into storytelling. Let's not pretend like they don't have the money and the resources to do research and to cast actors who are South Asian, East Asian, or just anybody who's not white and a man. What bothers me the most is that as a result of colonialism, colonialism, my own people think of Indian practices such as Bharatanatyam and yoga as kind of stereotypical and want to distance themselves from it. You know what I mean? Because it's one thing to already be a person of color and then to also actively take pride in that and not try to be whitewashed. Why the hell would you want to do that? So to see Hollywood appropriate these cultures, and then suddenly when a white person is doing it, it's super cool. That just gives me the ick. I love Doctor Strange as a character. I love the transformation. Benedict Cumberbatch is an amazing actor. The reason I've put the myth of white supremacy, myth in air quotes in the title, is because the world is increasingly becoming right wing. And people, with all the revisionist history that's going on, people love to pretend like white supremacy is a thing of the past, but it really isn't. It's something that actively impacts decisions and the outcomes of people's lives every single day, every single second, you know. And with the rise of right wing, especially in the US, it's scary to see what little representation people did have also being taken away from them. An example of cultural appropriation that I also want to talk about is the recent Scandinavian scarf trend. Oh my god. Love to see a white person appropriate South Indian shawls and dupatta styles and pretend like they've reinvented fashion altogether. Is it so hard to give credit where credit is due? The whole spiritual wellness and commercialization of yoga that rips off ancient Indian wisdom and Eastern wisdom, East Asian wisdom, and repackages it in the barest ways possible just to sell a course or some stupid product. It's just so frustrating because South Asian communities, South Asian creators, South Asian people don't benefit from this in any way. And that is not right. So that's it. That's my rant on Doctor Strange, colonialism, cultural appropriation, and the myth of white supremacy. I will see you in the next one. If you stay till the end of the video, thank you so much. That means a lot to me.